Hey y'all, it looks like we're live here on the internet. Kind of just jumped on here spontaneous, it's a Sunday evening, and sometimes I get that feeling. Sometimes there's things that are worth discussing right now instead of putting them off. And Lord knows I put them off a lot. Different things, and sometimes I get to them, sometimes I totally forget. All right, so I was thinking about shooting a video, and I could have done that. But part of me just wanted to go on the internet live. You know what I'm saying? Just to wing it, just to one time it, just to get it off my chest, real quick. And actually, I don't know. Let's get some visuals. Basically, right? We're just listening to each other. Hopefully, I catch a couple stragglers and I get their opinions on what it is we're fixing to talk about right now. All right, but to kind of set a visual for anybody who was looking at things, I want to set the mood. You already see the title of this here broadcast, so you can kind of understand where we're going. But I just want to type in this real quick. I haven't done this yet, so we're going to see it. Just some images. I want to type in Donald Trump and March for Lives. Okay. And I want to talk about that. That's going to be the first part of basically a two-parter video or live stream, and I don't know if we're going to go into any more different various topics. Who knows? All right. While we have a little bit of time here on this Sunday evening, there's Donald Trump. All right. Love him, hate him. A lot of people do different things. All right. But that's him over there. March for life. March for lives. Babies' lives. Namely. Speaking out, going up in front of a crowd. I haven't seen the speech that he gave, but obviously delivering all sort of pro-baby rhetoric, right? And shockingly enough, I got to admit to you, kind of shocked that he's the first president who ever did it, right? Kind of shocked a little bit that's the case, right? But come to find out that is the case, that somehow, some way, and I forget how long this march has been going on, but somehow, some way, it's never been done before, right? Because for some reason, controversial, right? I'll talk a little bit about it tonight. Controversial. Before we get things underway, quick shout out to, he's not up on the thing right now, but Kobe Bryant, right? I assume that you know who it is. I gotta say, for example, let me go to my YouTube and we'll see what it is I'm talking about. I got word that Kobe Bryant had indeed died, and not only that, his young daughter with him. That's a double tragedy. And then, of course, other people, who we might not know but are equally as significant to the world, they also died in this helicopter crash, and it was, very unfortunate. Obviously, I think everybody agrees. And I wanted to point out, let's see, there's people talking about some other stuff, but a lot of people were talking about that Kobe Bryant thing today. All right, see, look, Kobe Bryant memories. All right, Lionel Nation was talking about Kobe Bryant. Everybody, I don't know that anybody didn't mention it, obviously. I wanted to point this out. Stefan Molyneux talking about Kobe Bryant. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, right here. It's one of those things that, everybody talks about at once, because you already know that's what's on people's minds, all right? And of course, you got Barfine up in Thailand. You got Lionel Nation talking about Kobe Bryant, right? Like, more Kobe Bryant. Kobe killed. It's from Jurassic Liars. You know what I'm saying? All this Kobe stuff. Everybody's talking about it, all right? So I heard about it. I've seen everybody talking about it. And I wanted to point out, as far as Kobe Bryant goes, he turned out to be one of those figures that some sincerely would have to be wrong with you or something. I don't know anybody who would feel good about this. Everybody's kind of distraught about this. Even myself, and I'm not exactly a sports fan or whatever. But Kobe Bryant gave us something, right? He gave us something. I think everybody, in one sense or another, understands that. And pretty much everybody misses him. I know there was that whole thing about allegedly him sexually assaulting a lady. This was some years back. I never believed it. All right. And yes, it is a case by case basis. I mean, I actually go into individual cases with my gut feeling and stuff. And of course, there does need to be evidence, due process, and all that. But on a case by case basis, I had no reason to ever believe that Kobe Bryant sexually assaulted any sort of lady. All right. Just don't had no reason to believe it. I don't think anybody else believed it. I think it shows right about now because nobody's talking about that. All right. They're just talking about how unbelievably unfortunate it is, right? And just shy. If people looked at Kobe Bryant and assumed that he was just going to outlive all of us, probably, looked at him as some sort of piece of greatness and stuff, just untouchable almost. As it turns out, well, no, that's not the case, especially up in these helicopters, liable to have an accident. There's been recent plane accidents here in San Antonio, like a couple of them. And, people with these small aircrafts, I'm just here to tell you, I don't really trust them, right? For some example of, oh yeah, he's untouchable, like nothing bad's going to come his way. Everybody tends to like him, all right? Nobody has beef with him, but meanwhile, he did die, and his daughter died, and all those other people died too. And it just goes to show you, obviously, no matter whose life it is, it's fragile, right? Very fragile, precious. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight, all right? And I just wanted to kind of put it on the record, get it all out there while still fresh on my mind. We're looking at Donald Trump right now in the March for Our Lives. Meanwhile, before we go into it, I just want to point out, and which is kind of obvious to everybody, there's opponents to March for Lives, right? Obviously, that would be the pro-choice type people. But I also wanted to point out specifically, if y'all recall, there's a rally. I believe that they have it every year, probably. And it's called March for Our Lives, right? Y'all might have heard of that, kind of spearheaded by the likes of David Hogg, Emma Gonzalez, and this and that. March for Our Lives. And what's kind of obvious, but isn't really, I want to drive it home because it is so obvious and simplistic, is that March for Our Lives, which is a totally different thing, which is all about gun control, what it is a play on words. And that's quite obviously what it is, right? Quite obviously, they knew that there was a rally that's being held every year called March for Lives, right? Which happens to be about, as you all know, not having abortions, not killing babies up in the womb, right? Which I believe is the most accurate way to describe it, killing them, chopping them up, scraping them out of the womb. That's March for Lives, March for Life. And then, as kind of like disrespect and to spit in their face, they created the gun control rally, which would be called March for Our Lives. And you can see how it's a play on words. You can see how it's a mockery. You can see how they're spitting in the faces of people who are fighting on behalf of, say, unborn babies. Spitting in their faces. And also calling for gun control, all right? And just on the simplistic definition of things, all right, you look at a rally called March for Life, and quite simply, quite obviously, just on the face of things, like we mentioned, people are speaking out on behalf of unborn babies. These babies can't defend themselves, not in any sort of way. The most helpless, the most innocent, by definition, human beings on earth, period. Okay, so that's March for Life. You could see how that's completely selfless. That's selfless. You're finding out on behalf of someone you don't even know because of how innocent they are, because of how helpless they are. Selfless, that's the definition. Now, you go to March for Our Lives, all right? That is the very definition. And people could want to debate it. I see that there's someone up in the room. There's two people up in here. I appreciate y'all. Thank you. I'm about to check out the comment section. But you go for March for Our Lives, the gun control rally, and by definition, by very definition, that's selfish. What it is selfish. I mean, you could debate it if you want to, but the very nature of it is selfish. When you say March for Our Lives, that means you're not talking about anybody else. You're talking about yourself. You're very selfish. You feel like that you should be able to control everybody else's life and whether or not everybody else can protect themselves and their families, accurately and efficiently. You want to dictate. You want to say how much is enough and how much is too much. That's what you want to say. It's the very definition of selfishness. And it's spitting in the face of those people doing the March for Our Lives rally that they've been doing for decades and decades now. So that's kind of interesting. I wanted to point that out. And then, of course, we got Donald Trump here. And he's making a speech. And a lot of people have a lot of different things to say about Donald Trump, assuredly. But I want to point out, obviously, it's a big thing, and people are looking at Donald Trump. There's certain people out there, and they hate his guts. It does not matter what he does. He will get out of bed on the wrong side of the bed. According to these people, it does not matter what he does. It is wrong and evil, no matter what he does. All right, we already know that, obviously. But if we, for example, hypothetically take Donald Trump out of the scenario, on the other hand, for those who maybe like Donald Trump, let's take Obama's name out of the scenario. He's, the previous president. Take both their names out of the scenario. Don't even think about names for a second. All right? You can know for sure that the great majority of people who are what you'd call pro-choice, and the thing is, it's not about choices, right? It is about one choice, and that one choice is murdering the babies. Now, people like to debate what the semantics of it, whatever. That's the choice that you're choosing, and that's the one that you promote. Okay. So, anyways, okay, don't even think about Donald Trump. Don't even think about President Obama. Think about this, you're either on one side of the fence or the other, basically. And I'm not saying you're a bad human being for being on one side or the other, but you are on one side or the other. And typically, if you are pro-choice, and we know what choice that is, typically, you're going to hate Donald Trump, right? And that's just, and I know there's exceptions to that rule, but not really, not many. All right, so you could tell, okay, just from that example alone, it's the spirit of things. You already signed on to baby murders and endorsing them, right? And so naturally, you're going to despise a Donald Trump. You have to, because that's the only way it's going to make sense in your mind. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know what you're thinking when Donald Trump's like making a speech about liking babies. You're probably seething, or some people are probably like seething, and they're thinking about themselves to like about women's rights or something. Meanwhile, half of the babies getting murdered are women. All right. So if you're going to talk about rights and stuff like that, but it's the spirit of things. All right. For example, it's like you take their names out of it. Do you appreciate the gun rights that are in America, or do you want to take away everybody's guns? Now, typically, if you want to take away everybody's guns, and maybe you want to BS about it, and you want to say, "Oh no, I only want to take away this gun today, and maybe that gun tomorrow, and I want to limit ammo, and I want to do this, and I want to dictate everybody's right to a weapon," even though these people typically are not experts when it comes to guns, right? In fact, typically, anti-gun people know nothing, not even the first thing about guns or gun safety, right? But let's say they are anti-gun and they are pro-police, military enforcement. Um, well, yeah, they probably don't like Donald Trump at the same time. It's a spiritual thing. It's not even about Donald Trump. It's not about Obama, right? That's kind of a side note. But I wanted to point that out right there. And just talk about, like, for example, it is disrespectful, the whole March for Our Lives. It's meant as disrespect, right? And not only is it very selfish, right? And it's like I said, it's very clearly spitting in the face of unborn children, and to a point where, like, I guess it's supposed to be ironic, but they'll never admit to it, even though obviously that's what the title of your rally means, is to spit in the face of unborn children that have been chopped up and scraped out of the womb. right? Not only that, but it goes even further because now that the children are born, say you wanted to protect them in the house, maybe your husband works out of town, maybe he's a trucker. For example, maybe you're home alone with the kids and stuff, and you want to protect yourself. Maybe you're a little lady. You don't know if five five dudes may bust down your door at any point in time, and you had to defend yourself away from five fellas, and you had to defend your children. Oh well, then maybe you might need an AR-15 at that point. You think? I think a lot of people already reason that, and that's why, for women especially, the AR-15 is more popular. Because what if it isn't just one person knocking down your door? What if it is five people or more? What are you gonna do? You're not gonna do anything unless you have a gun that's efficient in battling that sort of thing. All right, and then of course there's the safeguarding from tyrannical governments. And, and right there, as we've discussed before, I mean, that's where we go into topsy-turvy world. That's where nothing makes sense or nobody's even trying to make sense. Because people are anti-gun, right? They seem to be anti-baby as well, right? Never mind that you could protect your babies with guns, and that's typically what happens. Now you want to limit people's right to protect themselves, so you're like anti-baby protection times two, right? You're over the top with it. That's what it seems. And it's not because you're a dumb person or this and that. It's just you're extremely misled. And somehow, some way, nobody's going to convince you otherwise. Nobody can break it down for you. Hey, look, they're chopping up these babies. They're scraping them out. And guess what? They're selling the parts. And guess what? They've been caught for selling the parts. And guess what? They're going to continue to do it. And they're going to continue to call it women's health care and stuff like that. Meanwhile, we could have clinics. For example, I'll just throw it out there. We could have clinics that don't have anything to do with abortion, and that would give women all the health care that they need. Could have that. In fact, those do exist. You know what I'm saying? Um, Technically speaking, and at the same time, for example, none of it makes sense. It's not even supposed to. But for example, if people believe so much in their right to chop up babies and scrape them out and then sell them to the highest bidder, their parts. If they believed in it so much, well, they would put charity to it. Like they would fund it themselves, but they won't do that. All right, because nothing has to make sense. And they could call for all these gun laws, call for kicking down people's doors, call for confiscating all their guns, and then proceeding into giving all their guns to the government that Donald Trump runs. Ladies and gentlemen, none of it has to make any sort of sense, right? Calling us Nazis, no matter what race, color, creed we come from, doesn't even matter. We're all Nazis, KKK members. Meanwhile, they want to literally kick down everybody's doors and take their guns, just like the Nazis did to the Jewish people. And everybody knows it. Doesn't have to make sense at all. Okay. On a personal note, I really can't tell you what's the exact moment that I realized that I am pro-life and there's no going back. Like, I would never ever think to go back on that. Never. All right. Pretty much guaranteeing it right now. I feel pretty solid in my stance. All right. Like, I'm not wavering at all. I don't know when exactly that happened, but I know I've kind of felt like that for a long time. Probably even before my daughter was born, but after my daughter was born, obviously that increased, that multiplied. Right? Very much pro-life, very much so. Right? And while we're on the topic, actually, let me go to the comments. But while we're on the topic, see if anyone's out there. Zero comments. All right. Anyway, safety first, y'all. I know you might be holding a baby right now, and if you are, well, then don't even worry about the comments. But while we're on that, I wanted to say, and I said it before and I'll say it again, and I want to stress it. People like to talk about science and stuff like that, right? Meanwhile, science is very ambiguous. Science is always moving and stuff like that. And different scientists are going to find different things sometimes, right? But I wanted to discuss with y'all for a while, all right? The poor, disgusting arguments of so-called pro-choice people, right? For example, a couple of them, like there'll be the example of, oh man, but these babies going to be born in poverty, for example. Say, oh well, see, we're saving them from a life of desperate, miserable poverty. All these other children by murdering them, chopping them up, scraping them out, like it's a secret, and selling their body parts, and then staunchly refusing to admit that that's actually what happens. All right. So, okay. So there's all that murder and stuff, but there's excuses. For example, like the poverty thing, right? Meanwhile, I want to point out that scientifically speaking, there's really no way of knowing. It's really impossible to know. Say about these, whatever you want to say, 50 million, 60 million, 70 million, those are actual numbers. Children, little babies, unborn babies, have been murdered before they got a chance here in America, and that's America by itself. Right? There's no way of knowing that these 50 million, 60 million, 70 million people, there's no way of knowing that they wouldn't have grown up and actually bolstered the economy for whatever reason. Who's to say what any of these people would have invented, or the different innovations that they would have created? Who's to even say? There's no way to even ever know. It's impossible to know. So you take all these 50, 60 million people that they would assume would just dive headlong into poverty, and maybe that's not the case. Maybe they would be born into poverty and somehow, by their bootstraps, just drag themselves out of poverty, like the American dream, if you will, and make something of themselves, and in fact, make the world a better place. There's no way of knowing whether or not all these babies who are dead and gone never got a chance. There's no way of knowing just how much productivity they would have been involved with. All right, we missed that. We missed that opportunity of knowing. So that's what's kind of interesting. And not only that, I wanted to point out on a macro scale this this thing, because I swear that I've talked to at least 2 dozen people in my lifetime in which the conversation maybe gets a little bit deep, maybe a little bit of philosophical, and inevitably, I never bring it up. I'm never the one who brings it up, mind you. But inevitably, in the conversation, the term population control comes up. And I know that you've heard it in conversations as well, right? It's that dang popular. That phrase itself is so unbelievably popular. And when you hear the phrase, it's regurgitated at you like a robotic reflex, right? To where you could tell, obviously, you didn't create that thought. Somebody put that thought in your head, the population control thing. They put it in your head and you believed it. And like I said, countless people are going to regurgitate the same thing. And meanwhile, I want to point out, does not make sense. Doesn't even close to make sense. And then when I, press them a little bit for details, I'm like, okay, population control. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? They never really have an answer. And then I kind of press a little bit more depending on how comfortable they are. And I say, well, the most practical way of population control, as you're saying, is number one, yeah, there's natural disasters. And of course, we're not in charge of that. That would be God. But the number one other best way would be to kill people. All right? As proven by history, if you wanted to do this whole population control, there's no other way. You had to kill people, and that's the only way. So, I like to press them about that, and they're like, no, I don't mean that. It's like, no, there's nothing else that you could mean. There's no other way to control, quote, the population besides killing them. Either that, or, for example, going the other way and just having a whole bunch of babies. That'd be another form of population control, but in the other way. All right? But I've heard this so much, and it's kind of interesting. Because, for example, the world could be a ball, like I'm looking at the globe right now. Could be a flat Earth. Does not matter. Either way, it doesn't matter. And in that, say, if you go to places such as Texas, I can guarantee you, I guarantee it, you'll see a whole bunch of land, as far as I can see, with not a single soul out there. If you go to the right places, nothing, nobody. Just animals maybe and the breeze blowing. Nothing. They'll see nobody. you know, in every direction. So I mean to bring that up because there's other places on Earth that are just like that. In fact, a lot of places, right? So during the brainwashing that people incur about population control, you already kind of, a lot of people already know, you get tricked into it so very easily because maybe you live in a big city such as San Antonio or a big, big populated city. And I'm hearing about some of these Chinese cities and it's just blowing my damn mind, right? Like, because for example, San Antonio, if you include San Antonio and the surrounding areas, yeah, you're talking about maybe like 2 million people and change, maybe. If you can include everything around it, maybe 2 million people, right? And they got these Chinese cities that easily are like 10 million people plus. I mean, like just crazy amounts of people, and it would blow your mind. I never want to see a city that's like 10, 20 million people. All right, I never want to go to a city that's that big. That doesn't make no sense. But if you were to see that sort of thing, you will get the impression, oh yeah, we're overpopulated, and somehow human beings are ruining the earth. CO2 is actually poison for the earth, and humans breathe that out. And so therefore, we are terrorists, and we all need to kill ourselves, basically. And I know I'm speaking hyperbolically, but that would be the mentality, say, of a vegan, typically, or what I'm saying, an environmentalist, the run-of-the-mill environmentalist hates human beings, and it's unfortunate. And lots of times they don't even want to admit it because that's obviously dastardly, but that's what they do. All right. So I wanted to point out these things and the depopulation term and how they get brainwashed into it. Meanwhile, there's all sort of land that's just completely uninhabited. All right, so well more than we need. Like, for example, if the Earth had capacity, I sincerely doubt we're anywhere close to capacity. I sincerely doubt it. All right, you might say, oh, there's not enough vegetation and stuff. We can make things happen, actually. We're human beings. We're kind of creative that way. If we really wanted to, if we really wanted to work together and experience a little bit of teamwork and stuff like that, I'm sure we can make a lot of things happen. And what I want to point out, it's a theory of mine, and it's a scientific theory, and I think you'll find that it cannot be unproven. I dare you to try. And I know you probably want to try it, but anybody out there, I invite you to try to disprove this theory. Okay, not only are we not at capacity on the earth, but my theory is this, is that we could have more babies, hypothetically. Now, we're definitely under chemical attack, and if you don't already know it, God bless you. But we're definitely under chemical attack and stuff like that. We're under attack socially speaking, and it's all directed towards family, the family unit, and especially babies. All right, that's the enemy of certain people here on Earth, right? Okay, so, but imagine if we did have more babies, just like we did back in the day, where people had like 10 babies, and it would be one man, one woman until they died, right? And it sounds like a totally different world. It was. Okay, imagine we were doing that today, and everybody's still having 10 babies. You might say, oh, everything's going to get overpopulated. The world's going to heat over and melt, just like Greta Thunberg said, and then it would be our fault for having too many babies. Meanwhile, scientifically, there's no evidence that even suggests that that's what would happen. I mean, I know in a simplistic way you could assume, I guess, that somehow we'd reach capacity and tilt over and burst into a ball of flames. But scientifically, there's no evidence to prove that that would be the case. Right? And my theory is, and you check me on it, all right? And I'm taking this straight from the Bible, all right? For whatever it's worth. And I'm sure it says it in other places, but my theory is if we had all these babies and we just multiplied and we just got exponentially having babies, all right? If we decided to do that for whatever reason, the earth itself, believe it or not, would grow bigger. And I want you to take that in because I know it sounds fantastical. It sounds like whimsical at first when I say it. The earth would get bigger if there was more people, right? And it would become more efficient. You might say, oh, you can't prove it. Well, you can't prove it either way. But for example, if there was more people and we would reach a capacity for the earth, we would actually breathe out more CO2. There would actually be more industry, and that would release more CO2 into the atmosphere. The vegetation and different various plant life would grow bigger from that, from getting even more nutrients from the activity coming directly from human activity. Right? So directly from what humans would do, say if we kept those 50 million babies instead of killing them, 60 million, 70 million babies, our human activity would lead to a bolstering of the health of the earth. The vegetation would get bigger. There would actually be more rain in drought-stricken areas and stuff like that. And you can kind of see how logically that does really make sense. Of course, you wouldn't see that if you're an environmentalist, right? Because you consider every single human being as another thorn in the side of the earth, right? But really, there's nothing that actually proves that would be accurate. Meanwhile, like I said, if you take it back to the Bible, I'm sure there's a lot of different verses. But I want to point out to you quite simply, God, for example, he said, for example, and I think you'll remember this, he said, go forth and multiply. Okay, quite simply, I don't know if that'd be up for interpretation or whatever, but okay, so my interpretation when he said go forth and multiply was go forth, live how I'm telling you to live, and have a lot of babies. I think that's what he meant by that. He said have a lot of babies. Meanwhile, he didn't put a caveat on it. Right? I want you to point out, like, for example, in the Bible or anywhere else, I want you to point out to me where God said, hey, go forth and multiply, but make sure you don't have too many babies because I only made the earth so big. And if you have too many babies, well, we'll be shit out of luck. We won't. The earth will tilt over and it will burn into ashes and stuff because you had too many babies. He never said that. He never said that for a reason because it doesn't make sense. It's not true, right? So the God, for example, who said, "Go forth, do my will, and go forth, be fruitful, multiply," he knew full well that he created the earth, that he can make the earth bigger if he wanted. He can do whatever he wants, right? And so when you think about that, you realize that anybody who's ever had the term population control like it's a good thing coming out their mouth, they are sincerely misled, and God bless them, but they're not exactly Christian. That concept doesn't make any sense. In fact, it spits in the face of the Bible. All right, I just wanted to point that out. I don't remember exactly when's the point that I realized for sure. I know that back in my high school days, back when I was doing things that honestly were regrettable and shameful, right? Didn't know any better, can't blame anybody else. I was the one that made those decisions, right? And I do remember kind of, vaguely a specific incident in which, doing dumb things that I shouldn't have been doing. And then there was what you call pregnancy scare, right? In which that option was floated around. I look back at it many years ago and I cringe at that option being thrown around. Meanwhile, nothing ever happened because the lady in question was actually not pregnant, right? And that's my personal story that I had that's the very closest I ever came to that particular situation. And just like you out there, I know people, young and old, who have, for whatever reason, gone through that process of getting an abortion. And it seems quite like it almost goes without saying, but just to say it anyways, most of these people who are pro-life, like on my side and stuff, pro-babies, we're not demonizing any lady who's gotten an abortion. All right, there's some people out there who do rallies and protests, and maybe they might seem like it, but I'm here to tell you, I'm not judging you because you had an abortion. at all. Like I said, in my fallen state, while I was doing all these crazy things, that was an option that was floated around, and had it came to that, I don't know if I would have stopped it. Right? I was very upside down and very misled. Right? So I can't blame you necessarily, but you can turn around and sort of, for example, blame doctors, certain doctors who do it over and over and over and over. And that's what some people, these pro-choice type people, see. They're very naive and they choose to stay in that world. Um, they're very naive because they don't understand. If you're a doctor and over and over and over and over and over again, you're whatever, executing these abortions, there's no way in the world that it's going to maintain having any sort of significance to you, right? It's going to become like anything else to anybody else. If it's a daily occurrence, at a certain point, it's just going to be a joke to you. And it's going to mean nothing. And you're going to play around with dead baby bodies and you're going to chop them up and sell them to the highest bidder. And then these pro-choice people are just going to like turn around and claim that none of that's real. No, it is real. We caught them doing it. In fact, we have it on video, and we have all sort of photo evidence of it. If you had any heart in your body, you would take a look at the evidence that we have, and notice that it's grotesque. That it's like a nightmare situation every single time. Every single time. All right. So it's not to demonize people for getting tricked into it. It's just to say, gosh, man, they're being manipulated into a cult of death and Satan worship, satanic, right? And that is what it is. It's just very simple. At the end of the day, it is kind of simple, and we're not attacking anyone individually. But we're thinking about all those people who could have brought so much light to everybody's lives and stuff. Meanwhile, they'll never get a chance, and we'll never get a chance to know them. That's unfortunate. All right. Like I said, I did want to make this particular live stream a double-parter, a two-parter. That was basically what I wanted to say about, this March for Our Lives and March for Lives and Donald Trump and everybody hates his guts. Well, it's a spiritual thing, right? I mean, I dare you to find somebody who is pro-gun, who is pro-life, who is pro-border and having a secure border, and hates Donald Trump and everything that he does during the day. I dare you to find someone. You're not going to find no one. All right. So I wanted to get that out of the way. And also, I actually wanted to relay kind of a personal thing, which I'm going to touch upon officially. Shout out to the 3 people up in the room. Feel free. We might do a little bit of, a free-for-all at the end of this here broadcast. All right. Got a little bit of time. What's it, 10:20? Dang. All right. So we might tack on another 30, 35 minutes, something like that. I just want to let y'all know that I appreciate y'all out there for taking your Sunday out and unwinding with me. All right. You like it. I don't know why, but I appreciate that you like it. And I like that you're out there and stuff. And I want to hear from you. I really do. All right. So we're going to talk about some of the nitty gritty. Perhaps Kobe Bryant and whatever other topics. But I did want to talk about something on a personal level that's not necessarily related, but it's something that actually I wanted to talk about even before I got onto this pro-life tip. It was a video that I wanted to make, or a live stream, and I've been thinking about it for a couple of days. So I want to go ahead and, share it with y'all right now. It's in a sense related because like I said, like I put out there right now, I'm actually a big fan of life. And for people who don't deserve to get killed, like babies, for example, pro-life, like I like life. I think we should try and give people a chance, and I think that it's precious. Some people say it's like a gift from God, these babies. I would agree. And I would think about life as precious. We were talking about Kobe Bryant earlier, and it's like nobody in the world ever thought about Kobe Bryant and dying anytime soon. Nobody did. Everybody was shocked by this. All right, but you run around in helicopters and bad stuff happens sometimes. That's unfortunate. But life is very fragile. It's very precious. And trust me when I tell you, I know. And just like a lot of y'all out there, I might have looked into things that some people don't have the heart for. at all, like disgusting thing, like unnerving things, like things that'll give you nightmares if you think about them for too long. Scenarios that happen, they sincerely do happen in this wild, crazy place that we're here on Earth. Yeah, wild things happen. Things that are just unimaginable sometimes happen. And it leaves you wondering, how could it have gotten to this? How could things get so grotesque? How could these very scenarios, like for example, just recently, there was a teenager and he killed his whole family, shot them all up with a gun, shot his father, and the father actually lived, but it's like tragic. He shot and killed everybody else. All right. I just wanted to point out that I'm not a fan of violence, and I don't endorse violence at all. Yes, I believe in self-defense, and sometimes people go to war and a war is a serious thing. If you're gonna ignore war, well, you're gonna get ran all over. And I don't care, how much of a peaceful person you are. It's the way of the world. So these forms of violence do exist, and of course, people martial arts and this and that. It's always gonna be a part of human culture, and I can appreciate that. Self-defense, uh, all day, all day. I'll speak out for you, self-defense. But I don't endorse violence, right? I just want to put that out there as far as the martial arts and stuff like that. That's the kind of note I'm on I'm a big fan of it, and I realize that for any of us, we're not promised tomorrow. We're actually very fragile. It's very precious, very very precious. Okay, so with that being said, I wanted to touch upon, like I said, it's kind of a personal thing. And it was coming over my mind over the past couple of days, and I wanted to relay it. And I'll probably like do a more formal version of what I'm doing right now. But for example, some of y'all might know my story. It's a very typical one. There's nothing rare about my story. It's almost the rule when you think about it. For the most part, most of these children out here, they're getting jerked around one way or the other, and they're not being allowed to typically know their fathers. All right, you can't hardly shake a stick at anything without finding children who don't know their fathers. And trust me when I say it's unfortunate. So my personal situation, kind of typical, right, and very unfortunate, for sure. I haven't seen my daughter for a long time. I don't know, 5 years? Yeah, over 5 years. It's been a long time, right? But I wanted to touch upon it because it's an unfortunate situation, but it's also very typical. And just to give y'all a little bit of insight. For example, quite simply put, I don't know how to reach my ex-wife. I don't have the slightest clue. And the thing is, that's kind of by design. Like, not to incriminate anybody, but like if my wife wants to lay low, if she wants to not be found, she's gonna not be found, and I already know that about her. So that is kind of the situation, right? And what I wanted to explain is way back in my journey, like say at the beginning of my YouTube journey, for example, my YouTube journey, it started off shortly after, the separation and ultimately the disappearance. That's when my YouTube career started off, and like, for some of the people who have gone back all the way in the way back machine and checked it out, you'll see quite clearly that, I'm not the best, I'm not the most articulate person in the world today, but back then it was almost unbelievable. Like I couldn't hardly say nothing. All right. As far as the thoughts in my head, relaying them verbally, nothing. I was terrible at it. And through a lot of practice and repetition, I've become a lot better. Like I said, not to say I'm perfect, but a lot better at articulating what it is that's going on in my head. I can relay it to you now in ways that I just couldn't back then. All right, and there were certain ways that I always could. Like, for example, all throughout during school, if there was a test and it was about writing an essay, I would ace it. I would get like bonus points. Very good at writing essays. Not to brag on myself, but it's just that, like, if I were to take the trouble out of reading, if I'm taking that kind of like, if I'm making that effort, I'd want to read something that's interesting. I hate reading things I don't hate it, but I avoid it at all costs. Reading things that are just uninteresting, that I don't care about. It's like, it's not even entertaining and stuff like that. So I think about that a lot back when I did write, but I don't hardly write no more. All right. that was my form of communication back then. Then that and drawing and art and stuff. Like I would make that my form of communication. As far as verbally, nothing happening. It's very bad. It's very poor. Okay, so there's all separation. There's all sort of miscommunication that took place, obviously. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm blaming myself, to be honest with you, 100%. As far as my relationship goes, if we're being very brief, I made a crap ton of mistakes, right? And I know for a fact, and I see like all the different mistakes that I made in retrospect, and I'm like, oh man, I was ridiculous. I was living ridiculous, right? So I can't blame it on anybody as far as separation. That's me. That's all me, right? But okay, here's the thing. I tried during those times when I didn't had no idea. Like I was upside down. I had no idea what was going on. I was struggling to kind of understand what the world around me. And I was basically getting broken. Like I was hitting rock bottom, as a lot of people describe it. And it was maybe a couple months after that I was like so in my own loneliness or something like that. I was in a bad way when I decided, hey man, I always wanted to do this YouTube thing. That's always been a thing. It's like a hurdle for me. I'd never been good at being in front of a camera or being on a recorder, hearing my voice and stuff like that. I've never been good with that. And that's something, it's like I got nothing right now, dude. I have no idea where my daughter's at. Like panic mode. I wasn't just in panic mode. And so that's when I started my YouTube career at that particular. And so when you look back at it, you can see that I was not good at expressing ideas and stuff. Okay, I say all that to let you know that there was different various ways that I tried to reach out to my wife. One time I actually called her at her work. And that was a bad idea, man. Like that didn't work. And I just got real dejected. Like that's the last time I think I've spoken to her, except in child custody court, and I saw her that one time. Right. But in the meantime, what I was trying to do is I was trying to text her. I was trying to find her on Facebook and like send her a message. I was sending her letters, and mailing them to her work. Like I didn't know what to do. I was hollering at her family members and saying, "Hey, I don't know what's the miscommunication, but something wrong happened here, and like, I don't want nothing. Just I just want to see my daughter sometimes." And that never worked out, and all sort of stuff. But like in the meanwhile, I sent some messages, and technically I could go and we could look at them right now because I was actually looking at them the other day. A couple of different messages that I tried to send to my wife, and I have reason to believe that she actually saw the messages and then subsequently blocked me from Facebook. I'm pretty sure that that is what happened. So she actually saw those messages. If I had to bet money, I would say she saw the messages I sent to her and different various things that I said on YouTube as well. I would have to venture to guess that she saw these things, right? But I came across those previous Facebook messages, and to be quite honest, I don't want to look at them right now because they're embarrassing, right? A little bit embarrassing, right? And at the same time, as I alluded to, I still wasn't able to express my thoughts. Like I was having these thoughts and I was like trying to communicate, but meanwhile, it's not a dialogue, it's a monologue. It's just me talking at something with no response. And so that made it a little bit harder. And so I look back at the messages that I found, and they're not, say, violent, and they're not aggressive, really, these messages, just to kind of give you a little bit of a discretion. But upon reading them in retrospect, they look kind of bizarre. They look like someone who's not exactly thinking extremely coherently, right? And so to put myself, say, in my ex-wife's shoes, it's like, oh man, she might have read these messages and saw someone who's not really thinking coherently. He's not really expressing thoughts in a normal way. And so I don't know what's going on in my ex-wife's head. I don't know what she's thinking or what might be her motives. And I'm not going to pretend like I do. I don't know what's going on. So I couldn't just imagine that maybe she saw those messages and she's like, wow, it's kind of bizarre. It's kind of bizarre. And if it is kind of bizarre, maybe that's kind of scary too. Maybe that'll give you some idea that like, oh man, it's kind creepy, maybe. And it's not to say that it was overly creepy or anything, but someone could maybe get that interpretation. Like, I'm not going to put that past me. That's definitely a possibility. And I wanted to put that out there. And that's the last time I was able to like even try to correspond with her because, like I said, I'm blocked now. Like, there's nothing I can do. And moreover, she probably doesn't even use those Facebooks anymore. I mean, she's gone underground for sure. Right? She does not want to be found. Okay. So with that being said, what I would try to do is maybe in the future, maybe in the near future, see if I could send her a letter saying what it is that I want to say right now. And that I look back at those particular messages, and yeah, they do seem kind of bizarre. And not only that, I cover all sort of different wild, crazy cases on the internet. And like, for example, people get in these romantic relationships, like men and women, or sometimes men and men, ladies and ladies, and they get in these relationships, and it gets to like it reaches a fever pitch, and then someone winds up killing the other person. Right? It's not rare for me to hear these stories in which, okay, the lady's dropping off the kids, they're getting, joint child caring time, and the lady drops off the kids, and the guy runs up on her, shoots her in the head in front of the children, and then shoots himself. That's not exactly a rare thing. I see it. I see that sort of thing. I see that sort of thing. It's not like it's not less than a handful of times that I've seen where a mother during, say, a weird divorce turns around, shoots and kills all her children, and then herself, and then maybe the husband as well. All right, so I look at those scenarios and I'm like, wow, that's bizarre. And I'm sure there was all sort of bizarre red flags that happened even before and leading up to that. So I take a step back and I consider, well, what's the possibilities? Maybe my wife thought what I was saying sounded kind of bizarre, and maybe those were red flags to her, and she got scared, and who's to say what she thought, and ran and hid. If she knew about these cases, she'd have reason to be suspicious, if you will. Right. Meanwhile, that's never the case. Like, I look at these cases and they're so intense and so wild that most people don't even have the heart to look at them. Most people don't have the heart to investigate that sort of thing. It's too nitty-gritty for them. Meanwhile, yeah, I mean, I can see that the world is a crazy place. And I stand against that sort of thing. 100%. Like, these people out here, they're claiming to love each other. Y'all don't love each other. Y'all are in lust for each other. You're getting your emotions all into things. You're throwing away your lives, and meanwhile you're terrorizing the lives of your children out here doing these violent things against each other. It's despicable. Right? It doesn't even make a lick of sense. But when you're upside down in a world where you don't know what's what, yeah, you might do some bizarre things. And, I just thank God through the sequence of things that's happened in my life that, as upside down as I've been in my life and done weird, wild things that I can't even explain, that He somehow sought in me to go ahead and redeem my thinking, my thought process, to take the veil off of my eyes and realize, well, the world is trying to teach me to be destructive. The world's telling me to hate babies and to throw babies under the bus. I'm just not going to do it. And if it wasn't for these revelations given by God, maybe I wouldn't even have that thought process today. Maybe I'd be thinking entirely different. Maybe I'd be wearing a vagina hat on my head and running around talking about killing all the babies for our rights. Who's to say? But I'm thankful for everything that's happened. That's led me to the point where I can tell that a baby's life is actually valuable, whether it's born or not. It doesn't make no damn difference. Right? And I want to point out that although the things that I said at that particular time might have sounded slightly creepy, and I want to discuss them a little bit partly, they might have sounded slightly creepy, but there was some truth to them. Right? For example, there's one part of a certain message in which I relayed in a bad way. Like, it wasn't clear what I was saying. I didn't articulate it correctly. But what I was trying to tell my wife was that, okay, to put it in a better way, for example, right now, that in order to get the keys of heaven, I know that this sounds mystical, and people who don't know God, they would never understand what I'm saying. But in order to get the keys to the kingdom, and I'm not talking about after you die. In order to get the keys to the kingdom, you can do it, and you could have heaven on earth right now. You can have all the peace that resides in heaven. You could have it right now. A lot of people don't understand that. You could have it right now, those keys. But those keys, it's like on an individual basis. Nobody's going to give you those keys. You ain't going to sit around and wait for those keys like someone's going to give it to you. No, but those keys could be had today. I don't care how mystical you think it sounds. You can have the keys to the kingdom today. How? Is it very complicated? No, it isn't. No, it isn't. In fact, it was made extremely simple. Just forgive. Just forgive. Right? Because until then, you're going to feel this, you're going to feel these feelings and emotions in which you feel unforgiven. You feel like maybe forsaken by God, or you feel all these like happenstance, what you find in your brain as being random, bad luck. Um, that's gonna just wash away. A lot of people wouldn't believe it. It is gonna wash away. It's gonna float away into the air. It means nothing. But you have to embrace it. And some people will try to do it, and they won't have it in their heart to forgive. And therefore they'll continue to be tormented on earth, and they'll always be looking for something to satisfy them. And basically that is the definition of hell. You might as well be in hell, because you'll never get forgiveness. Why? Because you didn't forgive. And that goes for me, and that goes for anybody else. I don't care who it is. That's everybody's story, whether or not you forgive. First and foremost, just like everybody, because you were born a baby, the thing is, believe it or not, you're going to have to forgive your parents. Right? A lot of people's parents acting in different various ways and stuff. There's a lot of different variations there, but ultimately it doesn't matter. You're an individual person. You have parents. Right? And the first people that you're going to get mad at, whether you admit it or not, in your life, that's going to be your parents. Maybe your parents are monsters. Maybe they were. I've heard of a lot of different cases in which that's the case. The problem is that you have to forgive them. You have to forgive them. Because once it's revealed to you that you have no clue. Once you start to get that enlightenment, once God starts to touch your life, you'll start to see all the things that you did back in the day didn't make no damn sense. And you did them anyways to your own destruction. And you couldn't even stop yourself. You couldn't even help yourself. You didn't even know you were doing it. And meanwhile, you look back in retrospect and you think, wow, that's wild. I can't believe it. I can't even believe that I did all this. All right. And that's what I wanted to say. I don't believe in this violence. I see it all over the place. That's not the case. But the message that I was trying to relay to my wife is that forgiveness is going to have to take place in order for you to have this peace. The reason I was saying that to her in those messages is because I was realizing that in real time. I had a certain animosity built up towards my parents, and it became very clear and obvious. And I started to see how that in no way benefited my life in any sort of way. And just organically, there was a day I remember in which I decided to get up and go to my parents individually. Obviously, they had been divorced for a while, and let them know, hey, look, I did not appreciate what you were doing. All the different mistakes that you made and stuff, man, it got me very angry. And I explained like, oh man, I got so angry. And, I started doing things that didn't even make sense for myself, didn't even benefit myself. And I realized that the anger was controlling me. And it was causing me to do all these things. And meanwhile, I'm supposed to be here. And at the time, like I was into my 20s. I was like, I'm supposed to be here and a grown man. Meanwhile, I'm being controlled by this anger that I'm feeling towards you. And meanwhile, you're not a perfect, you're not meant to be perfect. I'm not meant to blame you for my entire life for the fact is, yeah, you made some mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. At a certain point in your life, you got to get the hell over it. And sometimes people have parents that are monsters. It doesn't even matter. You have to forgive them because, like I said, they have no idea what they're doing. They don't see what they're doing. So you have to forgive them. And the reason that you have to forgive them is not for yourself, or it's not actually for them. It is for yourself. It's to free yourself. It's nothing to do with whether or not they feel good about it. All right? Everybody has their own story. So in the message, and I want to be a little bit more clear about it, I was saying the keys to the kingdom, you can have them. I know that you can have them. You can have peace in your life. I know that you can, but you're going to have to forgive me for whatever it is that somehow, you know what I'm saying, that caused this rift. Like I said, during my whole marriage and beforehand, I was a beta male. All right? And we could dedicate a whole show to it, a whole broadcast to all the different various ways in which I was a beta male. Right? And that's not to say I couldn't get ladies. Oh, yeah, I could get ladies. I sure did. Back in the day, that doesn't have nothing to do with anything. I was still acting like a beta male. And it was just inappropriate. It was unacceptable. Right? So, if not only that, just forgive me for being a beta male. Here's the thing. It's not for me. It's not to benefit me that you forgive me on it. It's to free you from me. Right? Maybe I never made you happy and stuff and all that various those colloquialisms or whatever that you say about it. Maybe I'm not the guy for you, all right? That's all right. But forgive me for being a beta male, because if you don't forgive me, you're just going to have anger towards me. And whether you know it or not, whether I like it or not, I'm going to control your life. Because that's how anger works. Whoever you're angry at, I don't care who it is. For example, we got Donald Trump on the screen right now. A lot of people are so angry at him. Donald controls your whole damn life. Your whole life. He controls it like you're a little... like you're a little marionette and stuff, man. It's like he's just pulling all the little strings, making you do whatever he wants, all on Twitter. And that's what's nuts. He's controlling you through your anger. And it's not even that he's doing it on purpose. It's that you're allowing for it. It's your anger that's controlling you. And that's why I suggested for her. I was like, dude, I know I want peace for you. I want only the best for you. I did not fulfill your desires or whatever, all right? But you're gonna have to forgive me in order to get those keys. And it's unfortunate. I'm not trying to keep those keys from her. She needs to do that. And before she ever does that, here's what I can tell you, just like everybody else, before she ever forgives me, she's gonna have to forgive her parents. Right? And she has a wild story as far as her her being brought up. I'm not going to go into too much detail and stuff, but trust me, disgusting things, very irresponsible things happened during her childhood as far as her parents go. So it would be kind of difficult, I know it, for her to forgive her parents for the way that they failed her. But I'll know the very day in which she forgives them. And because she'll be set free. I know it. I know it for a fact. I've seen it before. I know how the sequence goes. If ever it dawns on her to forgive her parents for all the messed up things that they were involved in, immediately from there, she's going to know to forgive me. Because obviously, I'm not all that significant anyways, all right? Never did anything like crazy monstrous that all these weird perverts and stuff are out there doing. It's just that I was a beta male. Like, I could not handle my business in the way that a man should handle his business. And trust me, there's specific things that a man is responsible for. And if he does not fulfill those responsibilities, then he deserves to be left in the dust. All right? And trust me, that did describe me at a certain point. So that was the message I was trying to relay. And that might never come about. But I hope that it does, not for my behalf, but before her, for her behalf, basically. I hope that it happens. I don't know if it ever will, but I pray that it happens because I know that's when she'll attain peace. That's when she'll be able to take hold of it in such a way that most people on earth they'll never be able to attain it, simply because they'll never choose to forgive, and they'll always hold it against people. All right, I know people a lot of times they marvel at Christians, for example, in the public eye, who are quick to forgive people for the most heinous of things, for raping people, for murdering, say, their family members. They say, oh, you know what? It's my religion to forgive you. And from the outside world, people look at that as bizarre and say, oh no, they should want them to rot in prison. They should want them to get raped up and down in prison and stuff. That's what they should want. Well, it doesn't benefit you to desire for somebody else to get raped up and down, no matter what they did to you. It doesn't benefit you at all, and it never will. Right? Like, for example, as verses in the Bible say, hey, vengeance, don't even think about vengeance, because what that's going to be is a snare on you. That's going to trap you. Your desire for vengeance, your desire to get even with people, your desire for an eye for eye, an eye type of scenario, that is going to be your downfall. All right? Leave that to God. Leave that to God, because God will he'll produce the justice, all right, regardless of what anybody says. It's gonna happen. You might doubt it. You might look at certain people and say, oh, justice will never come. Oh no, justice comes every single time, without fail, regardless of how lazy and inept the human justice system happens to be. Now, those are the two parts that I wanted to share for tonight. Thank you, and I appreciate everybody for coming through. And of course, we're gonna have a news blitz and stuff just to do it, like a cherry on top. So as we're winding it down, let's just see what exactly is in the news. All right, I just wanted to get those out on record. Like I said, man, no animosity. I just want everybody in the world to know I don't hate anybody. I don't endorse violence. Just to be on record right now, a lot of y'all might know there's pedophiles and all sort of Satanists up in high places doing crazy, wild things above the law. Never, ever will they be caught up by human law enforcement, and they're just going to be above the law, and nobody's ever going to think about it. Everybody who hates Donald Trump is not going to think twice about the networks of pedophiles and Satanists who are trying to destroy the earth in more ways than one, and kill humans, and sabotage families, and the whole nine. All right, those people, they're going to go under the radar and nobody's ever going to think about it. All right. Meanwhile, I want to say that I stand against it in every single way. In every single way. To the point it's like, don't ever let me catch you doing something that I feel is inappropriate, because we're all going to die. We're all going to die that day. I'm not even going to think twice. I'm just here to tell you. And that's how I feel. Some people might doubt that. Go ahead and doubt it. Doubt it all you want. Let me catch you doing it, and I don't care who you are. We're all going to die that day, and that's a promise. All right, so with that being said, at the same time, I know full well that the reason why all this pedophilia, Satanism is going on at the upper echelons is because that's being used as like a initiation. That's all part of the plan. You can't even get to the top tiers unless you're able to do wild, disgusting things to children. And I know full well, all right? I don't doubt it for a second. Meanwhile, they're going to use certain things, and they've already been using certain things to brainwash people, to get people, to convince people that certain people are guilty. Meanwhile, they don't have no evidence. And I would like to point out that those same pedophiles, those same Satanists, those same people who hate, for example, America, who hate babies, who hate your right to protect yourself, those people are going to try and incriminate everybody and they're going to call us all pedophiles, and they're going to try to do all these deep fakes, and they're going to do everything. They're going to say, oh yeah, oh Gerard, he was over there and he was googling 6-year-old girls and stuff. I know it, and so therefore he's guilty. And then the whole population is supposed to say, oh, AP just said that Gerard was googling 6-year-old girls. That must mean he's guilty as hell. Why don't you throw him in jail forever? All right, those are the simple, just just mind-numbing techniques that they're going to use, even though that's what they do, that's what they're into, that's what they love. They can't get enough of it, and they're going to incriminate us in the same ways. Like, so that's why I'm here to remind people, everybody out there, whenever they say, oh, Nicholas Cruz was searching this on the internet, oh, this mom, she was searching this and stuff, and so therefore it's incriminating. None of that is evidence, and it's not even close to evidence. And if that was the case, if this person really was interested in the exploitation of children and stuff, trust me, you'd find a lot more evidence than just that. So that's how you know. I mean, the media is out there to incriminate people and nothing else. That's the whole purpose. And so when the media comes on, and they come on all with their suits and ties, and they're like, oh yeah, Gerard, he searched this and that. We saw it on his Google searches. They're freaking lying. And trust me, they've been lying. They've been doing this. They're damn liars. And you know what's more sickening is that some people will actually believe it. They'll say, oh yeah, he must have done it because they said he searched this on the internet. Oh, you know what? You can't prove any of that anyways. It's impossible. What you're talking about is hearsay. Meanwhile, if you were actually getting an actual child predator, you would find evidence every which way. You'd find all sort of evidence. It would have nothing to do with Google searches. All right? That's how you know they're BSing. And that's how you know their motives. They're always going to accuse you of what it is that they're doing. All right? And we're going to see a lot of that in the future. Meanwhile, news blitz before we get out of here. I appreciate everybody. I don't want to be on here too late, man. Keep up my neighbors. But, of course, Kobe Bryant, dead. That's not good. If you wanted to see the grim wreckage of the helicopter crash, obviously you go to the New York Post, man. I don't think they have no shame. Trump tied Ukraine aid to inquiries he sought. Bolton book says, yeah, I'm sure Bolton's book is going to say a lot of things. In fact, you know what? His mustache says a lot of things, dude, and I'm tired of it. Okay, so just to breeze by that. U.S. Navy now jamming GPS over 6 states and 125,000 square miles. I don't know why they're doing that. That sounds pretty, sounds kind of suspicious. Who's to say? That's really none of my business. Local state education board member traffics in fake news. Dude, I'm tired of how many people say the word fake news. And everybody just says it about their, like, political opponents, and it's just stupid, man. Ex-CPS social worker charged with human trafficking. That's just another example. It's not to say every CPS worker is out there human trafficking. It's just to say that a good percentage of your CPS workers are trafficking children for sexual purposes and for everything else. You know what I'm saying? But that's the kind of society. It's like when you turn your blind eye and you focus on, like, for example, if your whole life is dedicated to hating Donald Trump, well, you're never going to see this. And you're never going to pay that any mind. That's going to go under the radar. Senator Chris Van Hollen, Hunter Biden, a total sideshow. I don't know if we had to say anything else about that, but Bloomberg warns anti-Semitism rearing its ugly head. That's another point of contention. This is a straw man. I just want to reiterate that over and over again because it's painfully obvious, but just for anybody who doesn't know, in America, anti-Semitism is not a widespread thing. And I know a lot of people would like to think it is. No, it's not. It really isn't. And the biggest examples that you can point of anti-Semitism that you're going to find, trust me, I've seen it, are on the internet. Like, say, with content creators or just different people who like to go on 4chan or something like that on the internet, right? So, that being said, Obviously, it's kind of obvious that most of those people are embarrassed by their own philosophies and their own mindsets. That's why you don't see them out in the real world expressing those thoughts. That's why most of the time they stay behind computers and stuff and express their anti-Semitism, or whatever. And that word doesn't even make any sense to begin with, because Semite does not mean Jewish person, right? It actually means a couple different things. Like a Christian could be a Semite. I think a Muslim is a Semite, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember exactly, but it's like, okay, they try to connect it to just Jewish people, and oh, you have to be having some sort of hatred for Jews. That is not a big thing in America. And the whole point is that it's just to incriminate white people, basically. If we're going to be simple about it. And typically, it's white people who are incriminating all the other white people. Right? And they're throwing up the red flag of anti-Semitism every time you say one mumbling word about somebody who happens to be Jewish, because that person is above reprieve, and like that person cannot ever be talked about. Either that or you're an anti-Semite, and that's the way it is. And meanwhile, I'd like to reassure you that quite definitely there's going to be terrorist activity here in 2020. That much I can guarantee you. And it's going to be of a suspicious nature. It's not going to make any sense. They are going to blame it on Nazi KKK members who are taking over the nation. Meanwhile, that's such an extreme minority that it might as well be the most extreme minority of people in America are these so-called KKK members, so-called white nationalists, people who are out to like genocide everybody or like ship everybody off in boats. It's not going to happen, and it's a stupid thing, but it is a totally fabricated thing being manipulated. People are going to lose their lives in some sort of scheme and a hoax, and people are still going to lose their lives, and it's going to be blamed on these KKK members who you don't know and you never met. And basically, they won't exist. Death row inmate Nick Sutton saved my life. Governor Lee should save his. That's kind of interesting. We don't have time to read through that because we're going to get the hell up out of here. But that's kind of interesting. I'll let you know that, so long as you have a breath in your body, I've said this before, I don't want to say it a million times. If you're breathing, if you're alive, then you have in your capacity the ability to turn back to your Father. That would be God. Right? And this is a reason why every last human being is very significant, very important. It's not because you're perfect, because you're so pious that you deserve, what I'm saying? No, it's every human being in the world, to include Hillary Clinton, if you can even believe it, has the capabilities of repenting from their stupid ways and just turning to their Father, their true Father. That would be God. Right? And so that's an example. Like, say this man on death row, I don't really know the story, but he might have saved this guy's life, right? And that'll show you that, in a way, like a human being can benefit. He might be on death row, maybe he murdered all sorts of people, but he's got the capability of saving somebody's life, and that might have just very well happened. And at the same time, I don't believe in death row, and I think that's a joke, and that's weird. That's actually torturous and weird. The fact that you would keep someone straggling around for 10, 15 years, awaiting their death the whole time, and we got to pay for it every step of the way. It's like, call me callous, I don't believe in violence, but he's on death row. Why don't you just kill him tomorrow? Is he guilty? Did y'all have a court case and you found him absolutely guilty without a doubt? Well, then why are we waiting around? None of this makes sense. We're going to spend all our money for nothing, right? So this guy probably shouldn't even have been alive necessarily, but thankfully he was, and he saved that dude's life. Police chase in Hollywood, suspects in custody after high-speed police chase in Broward County. All sort of wild stuff happening in Broward County, I'm sure. I don't want to go into all the different things. You got Aaron Carter, and somebody's making fun of him. Aaron Carter is worse than the Paul brothers. I don't know. The Paul brothers is pretty bad, but Aaron Carter is pretty dang bad off as well. All right, he's going down a lonely, desperate road. And I don't say that to make fun of him. I almost wish that I could reach out to him and convince him to not do everything that he's doing. Not because I'm annoyed, but because I see where this road ends. It's a dead end road. And it's not going to end well. And meanwhile, people are jerking him around and stuff. And who's to say what's going on? Look at this person. That person's wild. It's got wild, crazy eyes. And these people, it's like, it's interesting. It may not be right. It may not be accurate. But when you're being accused of moving to this country and marrying your brother, when you're being accused of that, you might want to address that, and you might want to correct the situation, or you might want to completely avoid it and not talk about it, because you actually married your brother and you're disgusting. You're doing disgusting things. I don't blame you, because you're so upside down in your fallen state that it's who's to blame you for marrying your own brother? Maybe perhaps you had relations with them too at the same time. Like, who's to say, dude? I don't know your culture. Right? Come over, obviously, you would have been killed in your own country for doing half the things that you're doing over here. And meanwhile, you're calling us all pieces of crap and saying that you're more American than we are. Right? That's how nuts you are. Right? And your husband now is estranged, not your brother, but your other husband. Now he's estranged from you because he can't stand it. You're just unfortunately a person that nobody can stand. Right? And somehow you're a hero to a certain constituency in this country. Sources say Kobe Bryant's daughter Gianna died in the helicopter crash, and that is extremely unfortunate. Not only did he die, but he died alongside with his daughter. He had to know that she was about to die along with him, and they look very close. I gotta say, that's how I like to see a father and daughter, being very close, being able to where you could tell that they had this bond that was gonna always be unbreakable. You can look at them right now and see that bond, that's unbreakable. There's no splitting that apart ever. And tragically, they both had to go down together, and it's just very tragic. It's like I can't even say anything else about it. Tool wins Best Metal Performance. I'm glad for them. Tool, that's a good band. Stuff like that. You got this guy, and that's an interesting note. All right. A lot of people are getting away from alcohol. They still want their fancy drinks and their cosmopolitan drinks and sometimes their microbrews, but they're wanting them without alcohol. I've noticed that's an interesting trend that's going around, right? And I gotta say, on a personal note, I don't drink much alcohol. I drink some alcohol, I guess, sometimes, but I don't drink it very much. And it seems as though society's going that way. For all the bad things and all the weird things that are happening with the youth today, and the people are concerned for them, at the very least, these people are getting away from alcohol. That's commendable. Right, because typically alcohol just leads to all sort of mistakes and all sort of things that you wish you didn't do, but you did do, and then you're like, you know what I'm saying? You're left trying to explain all your odd behavior and stuff on this alcohol and why you're so dependent on it. Back in the day, like I hear stories, like you probably have heard stories of people back in the day. They all seemed like they were alcoholics, dude. Like every last one of them was drinking like a damn sailor. All the stories that I hear back then, it's like, dog, y'all were drunk all the time. Right? It was irresponsible. At a certain point, it was just kind of irresponsible, dude. And, for better or for worse, we're getting to a point in which like people are actually realizing, it's not all it's cracked up to be wasted drunk with everybody. Like, it's actually, you wake up feeling like crap in the morning. Like, it's not even that beneficial. All right, and people are starting to kind of learn from that. Anyways, we're headed headlong into the future. Who's to say if we'll even be able to have babies later? All right, but in the meanwhile, the world is adjusting, the population is adjusting, and I see plenty of hope for the future in Generation Z. Not those millennials, unfortunately. And no, I'm not a millennial. I'll punch you in the nose for saying otherwise, right? But that Generation Z, I see a lot of hope for them, right? And it might be a little too late, but anyways, I'll holler at y'all a little bit later. And I appreciate y'all, man, for just hanging out. And I'll catch y'all the next time. I'll holler at y'all. It's January the 24th, 2020. I'll holler.